alkalinities, where the plants evolve, that's how they evolve. If you have another plant growing in a different acidity, it's going to prefer that. And that's why at home, you want to make sure that your soil matches. That's why farmers, when they plant corn or they plant soybeans or something else, they always have to check the pH of the soil. Otherwise, it won't grow. The other thing they do once a year is they go out and check about 4 or 5 places in their fields, what are the macronutrients. That would be the nitrogen, the phosphorus, so that they get nice and pretty leaves, the potassium, so they get nice roots. Because if they're deficit in one of that, they will not get good plants growth. And that's what they're all about, is getting maximum amount of plant growth. And so if they're a little bit low in nitrogen, they may have to add more nitrogen. Now, when they have done all this planting, some of the things they do is they want to have, if they're not industrial, not the compact, they want to have a systematic grazing system. For example, they may have the cattle out there for a couple weeks, and then they're going to move it to a different field. Then they're going to maybe put the chickens out there, because the chickens go out there or the pigs. The pigs eat the manure. They poop a little bit out, and the chickens go out and they spread everything around. And so it's, all over the place. So they want to plan how they're grazing so that they don't have a tragedy in common. They want to also store manure because they do not want to be responsible for destroying the Gulf of Mexico or rivers or streams around them. A lot of them are now storing the manure and producing methane. At Hyperion Wastewater Treatment Plant, they take the solid remains from people that live in Bel Air or downtown LA that have come down through the sewers, and they isolate it and they put it in towers, and they put it in with certain types of bacteria that take that material and make methane out of it. Hyperion takes that stuff, ships it over to the power plant right next door to them, and Hyperion makes enough electricity from that to supply 70 to 90% of their electrical needs. There are farmers that are doing this, that are basically collecting all the manure and then doing the same thing, producing methane. They're supplying enough electricity for their farm and 1,500 other homes. So, nice way to get extra money. Manure testing they want to do because sometimes the manure, they have differences in the diet. And if they're going to spread the manure on their field, they want to make sure they don't have too much nitrogen on the field. Too much nitrogen can actually what's called burn the crops. It makes it not healthy. And so they don't want to put too much manure, and then they want to put the right amount, and then find out what other nutrients are there so that it matches the crop they're growing. All crops don't have the same requirement for the macronutrients. Now, sometimes to make a little bit of money, they have an area where wildlife can go for multiple reasons. One, they may be a hunter. Two, they may sell rights to go hunting in the area. Three, they may have that so that is where honeybees live, that is where bumblebees live, they need to pollinate their crops. And so it's beneficial for them to have a wildlife area around there just for fun, make it pretty, but also to help them have the pollinators they may need for the plants that they have. The nutrient management, like I said, they want to be able to plant it. And you see there are two types of things right there. This one right here, what that is a tractor pulling this great big huge thing that spreads the fertilizer. It just spreads it out behind it, and they do that because they now know what the soil needs. This one right here, I don't like whatsoever. I almost died because of this thing. when I was working in plant. What it does, it has little things that go down into the ground. They do this typically after a rain. Little things that go into the ground, and they put anhydrous ammonia, which means it's going to go directly into the water that's in the ground. And that's how it's actually a lot less expensive than the other ways of getting the nitrogen out on their field. Reason why I don't like it is I basically almost stopped breathing because of working on that stuff. But that's another story. Too bad. Sometimes they have ponds. Why? Because they may have aquaculture. They might have kids that want to go fishing. They may have livestock that will need the water to drink. Now, if you notice here, when they're planting the crops, they need to do it intelligently. Because one of the things that happens is they don't want to lose the soil. If there's too much erosion, water erosion, they're going to lose their soil. And so what they do is they plant their crops 90 degrees to the slope of the hill. And that way, what happens is that as you have this slope right here, they go like this. And so what they have on here, oh, come on. They have this going here. So they have these little bumps where they've planted the food, like the corn or the soybeans. And so when water goes down there, it hits this little dam, goes over it, hits the next one, slows down, slows down, slows down. As opposed to having all these little berms in the same direction as the flow of the water, directing it down, making it go faster and faster and collecting more and more soil. Any questions on that? Now this right here is basically the same idea, where if there is a waterway, they're going to put plants in there that's going to slow it down so that the water, that way they don't have to irrigate. If the water stays in their area longer, it's going to go underground and stay in their area. Chris, do I need to move you? Okay. It also makes it so that they don't lose the nutrients from the field as fast. This is looking again at the contour farming. You notice a slight incline right here. Come on. Where it's going downhill a little bit like this, and where the rows are like this. The rows with the plants in them, again, slowing down the flow of water so they don't lose so much soil. Now, what you see here is something called a terrace. Do any of you know where terraces, first, what is a terrace? We have a lot of them here in La Cañada. Well, a little bit of that, but if you look up Commonwealth or other streets like that, which are going up the hill, each property is parallel. And as you go from one property to the next, it may drop 2 or 3 feet. And then you've got another terrace where right below it, it may be 2 or 3 feet, drop to the next house and so forth. That's what a terrace is. It originated in Peru with the Incas and Aztecs. I don't know which one was in Peru, but they developed the terraces. And they developed on the side of mountains to plant the potatoes and corn. Corn and potatoes originated with the Native Americans in Phoenix area and the potatoes down in South America. Okay, they were beyond brilliant. Another thing that they don't want is what happened in Oklahoma in the 1920s. In Oklahoma in the 1920s, Oklahoma's flat. They had basically got all their crops out. They basically turned over the soil so that it can decompose. And then they had a dry winter, lots of wind, and the soil almost went away. There was such winds, sandstorms, it was unbelievable. And sandstorms can go a long distance. For example, a sandstorm from the Sahara Desert can go all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. Well, sandstorms or windstorms in Oklahoma, basically you couldn't see when this was happening. I wasn't there, but that's what pictures I've seen and so forth. Now, what a lot of farmers are doing is instead of, okay, most farmers, at the end of the year, they come in with the plow, tip this over so this becomes dirt. A lot of farmers now are not doing that. They're controlling how much they plow so that they're less likely to lose the water. Another thing that they do is called crop rotation. For example, what you see here is a field, the yellow stuff is corn. Like I've said too many times, corn steals nitrogen. Right next to it, you see a field of alfalfa, which adds stuff back into it. And so when you alternate crops, it makes it so that you don't have to use as much money buying fertilizers. And besides, that way you might be able to get a hedge up on what the price of corn is that year, or the price of soybeans that are that year, or wheat, whatever. You also want to keep a wetland. That way you don't lose as much water. It's also a great place to have certain organisms around so that it helps with the pollination of your field. One of the things you really need to worry about is not the fertilizer, but the pests. There are 3 types of pests. There are a pest is basically defined as anything you do not want. So one year, if you're growing corn, a soybean plant would be a pest. The next year, when you're growing soybeans, a corn plant would be a pest. Now, the 3 different types of pests, the way they get rid of them are with pesticides. An insecticide kills insects. Fungicide kills fungi. And I don't like the middle one because of my Uncle Herbert. I don't like the idea that farmers put herbicides to kill my Uncle Herbert. No, herbicides kill plants. There's tons and tons of them that are grown every year. Do any of you use pesticides to get rid of insects at home, like mosquitoes or fruit or flies or stuff like that? All of us use them. Be careful. You don't want to overuse them because they may or may not have been properly tested. For example, Roundup has been found to cause cancer. Roundup is the one up at the very top, the one that is used the most, the glyphosate, and 49 million kilograms applied, 40 million kilograms applied each year. That's disgusting. That much is, and especially since it causes cancer. Or back in the 1950s and 60s when they had DDT to get rid of mosquitoes. And they found out all the nasty things it did to humans. So, if you are planting, or if you're using a pesticide, what's going to happen is eventually the pest might become immune of it. But why? Because of natural selection. So, under the first time you're growing your crops, that may be the organisms that live there. And then you spray. What's going to happen are the yellow ones, the ones that are susceptible to the pesticide are going to die. The ones that are not susceptible to it are going to survive. And then over the next several years, you're going to get more and more of those. So what do you have to do? You have to apply more of that pesticide. That is called the treadmill effect, the pesticide treadmill, where you have to go higher and higher and higher to get rid of it. What we need to do instead is start thinking. Start using biological organisms. For example, how about ladybugs? How about praying mantis? How about whatever to get rid of the pests or to eat the particular weed? Let's use those instead. That is all part of something called integrated pest management. What integrated pest management does is it uses biological control, like the ladybugs. What is amazing to me is farmers have gotten into the habit. If they go out, they plow the field. They then go out and plant the seeds. And then a week later, whether there's insects, pests, or whatever, they go out and spray pesticides, whether they need to or not. They have not checked to see if there's any pests there. They just spray it. Part of integrated pest management is to be smart about it. Go check this part of your field right here may need it. Spray that area. Don't spray the entire thing. Just spray the way that the areas that needs it. Also, don't always plant the same crop. If you always plant corn, you're going to have pests in there that really like corn. Well, one year plant corn, the next year plant something like soybeans, where the pests that like corn can't stand soybeans. Why is it so important? Because we do not want to kill all the bumblebees. We do not want to kill all the other ones. Why? Because we require them to pollinate so many crops. If you look at this guy right here, this plant off to the right is pretty red, right? That's what we see. But the bees can also see in UV. And what they see is an additional stripe. A lot of these flowers have an additional stripe on the plant, basically as landing locations. Let's have you go in that area, because right in here is where the nectar is. And if you go in here, you're going to rub against the pollen, so that when you go against the next plant of this type, you're going to have all this pollen on top of you. You'll be able to rub against the female part of the next plant and fertilize it. Fertilize it so that you can get seeds like corn, soybean, and stuff like that. There are different types of pollinators. Some of them are birds, like this guy right here, like like hummingbirds. Another one would be bats. Bats are very, very good at, for example, palm trees and stuff like that. This one right here we've talked about before, which is called the, what is that called? Yucca tree and the yucca tree moth. This one right here is just a bee. All of those, well, how does this one pollinate? The wind. There are some plants like the succulents right there, or corn, where they require wind. The wind blows the pollen from one plant to the next. And so we don't want to wipe them out, because I like honey in my tea. I like honey basically every place, and therefore we don't want to wipe these out. And if we wipe them out, we're going to basically wipe out the ability to pollinate plants. Any questions? Okay. What we're going to do for the next 45 minutes. Some of you have done this already. This is the original one that came out in the late 60s, early 70s.
end of town where the grickle grass grows, and the wind smells slow and sour when it blows, and no birds ever sing excepting old crows, is the street of the lifted Lorax. Grickle grass, street of the lifted Lorax. Grickle grass, somebody lifted the Lorax away.
What was the Lorax? And why was it there? And why was it lifted and taken somewhere from the far end of town where the grickle grass grows? The old Onceler still lives here. Ask him. He knows. You won't see the Onceler. Don't knock at his door. He lurks in his lurkim on top of his store. And on grippy midnights in August, he peeks out of the shutters, and sometimes he speaks and tells how the Lorax was lifted away. It all started way back, such a long time back. Way back in the days when the grass was still green, and the pond was still wet, and the clouds were still clean, and the song of the Swami swans rang out in space. One morning I came to this glorious place. Then I saw the trees, the truffula trees, the bright-colored tufts of the truffula trees, mile after mile in the fresh morning breeze. And under the trees I saw brown barbaloots frisking about in their barbaloot suits.
Under the trees, happy barbaloots. Under the trees, in our barbaloot suits. Under the trees, Dracula fruits. Oh, these succulent, mellifluous, deliciously, mellifluous, sweetly succulent, fluous, Dracula fruits. Come, under the trees. Hum and fish are humming, under the trees. Under the trees.
Oh, these glorious,
Glendulous, glorious, glendulous.
dandy, flandulous, Dracula trees.
Those truffula trees. All my life I've been searching for trees such as these. The touch of their tufts was much softer than silk, and they had the sweet smell of fresh butterfly milk. I felt a great leaping of love in my heart. I knew just what I'd do. I unloaded my cart. In no time at all, I had built a small shop. Then I chopped down a truffula tree with one chop. What you doing in my tree stump, buddy? Your tree stump? Your tree stump? Mister, I am the Lorax. I speak for the... Forget it. I don't really need the stump. You can have it, little fellow. Just enough to finish the cuffs. The thing of beauty is a joy forever. Now, who'd you say you were, little fella? Mister, I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. And I am asking you, sir, at the top of my lungs, that horrible thing that I see. What's that thing you've made out of my truffula tree? Look, Lorax, calm down. There's no cause for alarm. I chopped down just one tree. I'm doing no harm. This thing is most useful. This thing is a need, a fine something that old people need. It's a shirt. It's a sock. It's a glove. It's a hat. But it has other uses. Yes, far beyond that. You can use it for carpets, for pillows, for sheets, for curtains, for covers, for bicycle seats. Sir, you're crazy. You're crazy with greed. Well, there's no one on earth who would buy that fool's need. the birth of an industry, you poor stupid guy. You telling me what the public will buy? Please, I object in the name of the trees. All complaints will be filed in this box, if you please. Now I've reached the stage where the potential was known. This business was too big for one Once-Lore alone, so promptly I built me a radio phone. I called my brothers and uncles and aunts, and I said, listen here, here's a wonderful chance for the whole Once-Lore family to get mighty rich. Get over here fast, take the road to North Niche, turn left at Weehawken, sharp right at House.
Opportunities knocking, there'll be no more squawking. When I get rich, filthy rich, no more holes in a stocking. Terrific Weehawken to the house of the glorious Once-Lore we go.
Gentlemen, I wish to speak for the trees. Here are some facts that cogitate and ruminate. It takes 10 months for a trophula seed to germinate. It takes 10 long years before the seed grows into a sapling. It takes 10 more years. And in no time at all in the factory I built, the whole Once-Lore family was working full tilt. We were all knitting blades, just as busy as bees, to the sound of the chopping of trophula trees. Oh, my business did grow. Now chopping trees one at a time was too slow. So I promptly invented my super axe hacker, which whacked off 4 trophula trees in one smacker. We were making sneeze 4 times as fast as before, and my profits, incidentally, were soaring galore. Inadequate roadways. I want a 4-lane highway over there. Instant Roadway Company at your service, sir.